Wisdom. It's an incredibly valuable asset. Some would say more precious than gold. It's attractive, appealing, admirable. Conversely, a lack of wisdom is the basis of immaturity, blind spots, and bad decisions. Wisdom. It can be gained over time, but it can't be rushed. But wisdom can be shared. That's precisely what we are here to do right now. Today, we are here to hack wisdom, to distill it, to understand it, and to process it. Why? To get better at life. Welcome to The Main Thing. This is your new 9-minute podcast. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, and I've set out to interview the wisest people I know. We'll see what we can learn from each one when they're faced with an incredibly difficult, soul-piercing question. Dr. Jacquie Bowen, welcome to the Main Thing podcast. It's great to have you on this morning.
Thank you, Skip. I'm honored to be here. And I really mean that. As I've been reviewing your past guests, I have to say my little chronic imposter syndrome sort of crept in that I might be one of the wise people worthy of being a guest on your show. So I really am looking forward to our chat.
Very kind and very humble. Speaking of prior guests, let's talk about how you and I are connected. And that's by way of a prior guest, Dr. Brad Lane.
Yeah.
How do you and Brad know one another?
Brad and I are both optometrists, and we are both heavily engaged in volunteerism for our profession. So he is an officer of a large region of optometry organizations, and I am the president of our national association. So he and I have known each other for over 10 years. We have a lot of connections and commonalities as optometrists, but we've found that there are a lot of things that we agree on and like to talk about and support each other through that extend well beyond our profession.
I love that. He's just, as we say here in West Virginia, he's just good people. He's
right.
just good people. Brad and I are
I
friends.
always come away with a little bit of an accent after I've talked to him too.
I apologize in advance because it may rub off for me as well. But Brad is
I'm easily influenced.
Of course, a former guest, and he's become a personal friend, and we encourage each other on some of our creative side hobbies and pursuits. Jacquie, I wanted to share this thought with you. This is not something that we pre-planned, but it just came to me this morning. I think it's an inspired thought. I wanted to share with you this notion of a connection between what we see with our eyes. Of course, you're an optometrist, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but you help people see the outer world. And our study of wisdom, this podcast topic often involves inward looking to hopefully arrive at insight. My new thesis for today is that one can't exist without the other. I wanted to say that I appreciate what you and Brad do. And I just wondered if you had any thoughts about that as you hear my thesis for this morning.
I love those thoughts. You know, my practice is called See Life Family Vision Center, and it's spelled SEE Life, but we also have an ocean theme. Now, in the middle of Colorado, that's a pretty unique theme to have in your office, but you step in and there's Adirondack chairs. We have a big saltwater aquarium and, of course, beach decor throughout. It's a double entendre, certainly, but through those words, See Life, my staff, my colleagues, my partners, and I have always realized or tried to remind ourselves that although what we're doing every day is fairly repetitive, with each patient experience, we are not just giving them clear vision or the best vision that we can get, but that's so necessary in the experiences they have every day. And even if it's not someone who has crisp vision, what you do with your eyes and so much neurological connection with your brain, so many things that you process throughout the day, all day, involve the vision and the eyes, both from a literal optics standpoint and a perception standpoint. So yeah, those are great thoughts.
Ties it all together. Jacquie, as you and I were getting to know each other and just getting acquainted a little bit for today's podcast, you shared with me, I think, a really rich and enlightening story about the early years when you opened up your own optometry practice. And there was a lot going on at the same time in your life, very early into that stage.
I bought a practice shortly after I finished my residency in Denver. I bought a practice in Greeley, which is about an hour north of Denver. Not necessarily a community we would have selected, but the opportunity presented itself. Unfortunately, It was a doctor who passed away quite suddenly and his practice became available. I did not have any interest in owning a business or being in private practice. My husband was very encouraging in that regard. And,
Okay.
we had some struggles, we had some blessings, but I became a practice owner. And as we established ourselves in the community, we decided to have children. So my first pregnancy was really quite good. I have to say I'm a little bit pregnancy arrogant in that I never was sick. I'm a tall woman. I carry it pretty well. It was not a big challenge to run a business, grow a business, network in the community while I was pregnant. So I certainly assumed that everything would go smoothly from there on.
Of
I was
course.
in practice by myself. I didn't have a partner at the time. And so, we had a plan. I would stay home for a couple of weeks, and I mean a couple,
Okay.
and then bring the baby with me to the office and have a crib, and I would feed the baby at regular intervals. We had it all figured out. Toward the end of my pregnancy, though, it was discovered the baby was breech, head up, feet down. That's not the way it's
Mm,
supposed to be.
right.
And we discussed some options, but basically decided on a C-section. And that really kind of rocked my world. I thought, wait a minute, all this has gone so perfectly. Why is this happening? And I got, pretty upset, talked to some friends who'd been through the same thing, got myself to a point of grace where, okay, this is no big deal. Abby was born. She had a little breathing trouble. They whisked her off to the nursery. And a couple hours later, when I saw her next, she was in an ambulance transport unit because it had been discovered that she had a pretty significant heart defect. The aorta, major blood vessel coming off the top of the heart, was constricted. And she was in a situation where we could care for her in the Greeley hospital. So they had to take her down to the Denver Children's Hospital.
Hmm.
So that was next level devastating. And
Yeah.
we prayed for her constantly. She was in good hands, but it was a couple of days before I was able to get down to Denver. My husband
Right.
went
Because
down
you're
there.
recovering from a C-section surgery, which is no small
Right.
thing.
My mom, who's in Montana, she came, right away, sooner than she was anticipating. Then we got down to Denver, and it was discovered that she would have to have heart surgery. So she was 3
Mm,
days old when they opened her up and went in and did some repair. And I thought, oh my gosh, a breech baby, that was no big deal. A little breathing, no big deal. My child has to have heart surgery. I'm like, this is as bad as it gets.
mm,
I can't believe this is me. This is happening to us? And it was a
yeah.
scary situation. So she, you know, did well in surgery, and over the next couple of weeks, she was having some trouble feeding, and her recovery was a little slow. Her wound healing was a little slow, and they had done some genetic testing prior to surgery with some blood. And back then, it took a couple of weeks to get that kind of information back. So when
Yeah.
she was 2 weeks old, they pulled us into one of those little private family conference rooms and told us that she had a condition called trisomy 13, which is each of the parents gives one chromosome, numbers 1 through 23.
Hmm.
And if you end up with 3 instead of 1 from mom, 1 from dad, she ended up with 2 from mom, 1 from dad. So that's trisomy, 3
Uh,
chromosome 13s.
okay.
There's a lot of genetic information on number 13, so there's a lot of things wrong. And they told us at that time, this is not compatible with long life. Had we known, we would not have put her through this surgery. But she didn't have a lot of the outward physical characteristics that they
Okay.
would look for. Life changed at that point.
Yeah.
And we were facing day to day, not knowing how long she would live, and some pretty extensive medical training and medical decision making at that point.
Hmm. Here you are, new parents, first child, new optometry practice.
Mhm.
Wow. You were fighting a battle on so many fronts.
Right. It was, so many times throughout her life. She lived for 20 months and 11
Mm,
days. She was a hospice patient pretty early on, so we
yeah.
had that support. Doug and I are, well connected in our church, in our
Mm,
community. We both sing in a large choral organization, 30 years ago, plus years ago, we joined that. So we had a lot of support, but so often people would say, how do you do this? How can you handle this? And
yeah.
when you're in it, you just do. I mean, the alternatives are not options for us. turning
Right.
over as a ward of the state and that kind of thing. Looking back on that, though, I asked myself that, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was a lot of supernatural intervention. The abilities that you have in a situation of crisis are astounding.
They really are. They truly are. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss, and God rest her soul.
Thank you.
Do you feel like you grew from that experience, that perhaps you developed a new supply or appreciation for how to call upon your resilience?
I had no choice but to figure out how to be resilient if I wanted to be successful in my
Yeah.
business and move on to what life would look like after Abby. It was really a period of coping.
Mm,
And when you're in a
yeah.
coping zone of life, which I know you have some experience with,
Mhm.
you have to really figure out how to be in the moment and recognize when your capacity is at max. So we had to figure some things out. I went to work 3 days a week. My husband went to work 3 different days a week. So whoever was working the next day slept near the wall, and whoever was on duty with Abby all night slept on the outside. So little
Right.
things like that. The longest she slept in 20 months was 40 minutes.
Oh, gosh.
So as you can imagine, we were both in a state of chronic exhaustion.
Yeah, I bet.
And it was all you could do to focus on her when you were with her, work when you were at work, and whatever else you needed to do in the moment.
Yeah.
So that resilience, I've interestingly enough, I've called upon that many, many times, but I've forgotten that I learned that many or something like that. You're a rock star when it
You
comes
can get
to
through
resilience.
anything.
Yeah. But it's discouraging how many times in life you're like, wait a minute, this is nowhere near as bad as what we were going through back then. What's wrong with me that I cannot
Yeah.
learn this?
Jackie, I just wondered if you had one recommendation or list one of our listeners right now. There'll be about 1,000 people that'll listen to this. One or two of them are in such a situation right now. What advice would you have for them?
In very, very dark moments, people will say all kinds of things, and they don't have any idea what the right thing is to say. You don't even know what the right thing is to
Mhm.
say. But I would encourage you to give grace to those who are trying to help. It's pretty easy to get angry or indignant
Mm.
if somebody isn't responding to your situation or says something like, you'll get through this, or God won't give you any more that you can than you can handle. And, lots of times people say things that are not only not helpful, but frankly irritating.
Mhm. Or goofy,
Recognize that, yeah,
quite
but
goofy.
recognize that they're trying, at
Yeah.
least they're engaging with you. And it's
Oh,
worse if you don't hear from anybody. It's worse to do this in a vacuum.
yeah.
And try to be thankful for the efforts that people are
Mm.
making and be brave enough to say, here's what I do need, if you can
Yeah.
identify it.
Yeah. That is great advice. I've been getting to know you, know that you have a really strong practice of self-care and spiritual care. Would you share a little bit about what your practice looks like?
Well, I'll start by saying that it's constantly evolving a little bit because there's so many
Okay.
things we should be doing, right? I mean, I should be able to do 5 man-style push-ups every day. I should be doing deep breathing. I should be stretching. I should be taking these supplements. I've come to realize what I can and can't do, particularly early in the morning. I am not the person that can get up at 4 in the morning in the dark, in the cold, or even in the warm and exercise. I prefer to do that later in the day. Long
Me
ago,
too. Me too.
I identified that, and I am a slow starter in the morning. I will get up early enough so that I can start slowly. So it starts with coffee. I wake up most mornings with a headache, truly, which
Mm,
is mostly neck and shoulder pain related and stemming from a whiplash injury from a ice skating fall over 20 years ago.
okay.
So I know I'm a little bit of a caffeine addict. That's part of my headache too. And I diagnose headaches for a living. I think a lot about these headaches. So one thing I will ask your listeners, if you've got a great pillow for a side/back sleeper, please let me know because I've
Mhm.
spent so much time and money trying to find it. Anyway, so I have started using an app. This was during COVID, so about 6 years ago. I recognize that spirituality is very important to me. I'm a Christian. I want to start my mornings with Jesus. And
Mm.
with the incredible busyness and fullness of my life,
Mhm.
it's self-defeating for me to think I'm going to sit down and do a pretty intense intellectual Bible study. So at this point in my life, I use an app. It's called Abide, and it's a guided
Mm.
meditation app that you can pick from 2 to 15 minutes. And, it does encourage breathing. So, in here in Colorado, we got to take in as much oxygen as we can. So there's some
Mm.
breathing.
Yeah.
There's, some neck and shoulder stretching, and making that effort to try to focus on what the app is guiding me through. There's usually one Bible verse that is repeated and many
You can reflect
translations.
on it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it has several different voices that are used. Some I like, some I don't, but it's an exercise not only in the obvious, what the app is trying to help me do, but in trying to maintain focus and not be distracted by the tone of a voice or whatever's going on. The other part of that hack is I have to do it first. And this
Uh,
morning I failed because I woke up this morning and the first thing on my mind was this podcast. And I wanted to review some of the things that you and I talked about. And I got going on that. I didn't stop and do my meditation first. And I haven't gotten around to it yet. And I don't know if I will
okay.
today because I fell
Well,
out of my routine.
love the
So
honesty.
before my brain goes off on a tangent, I really have to concentrate on doing that. So
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Abide is the app. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for listeners who might want to check out the Abide app. And I use something that sounds somewhat similar called Lectio 365. My wife Lisa turned me on to that, and it sounds very similar. It's peaceful and
yeah,
soothing, and it does have a Bible verse that you reflect on, and some guided prayer, and some quiet time for reflection. And thanks
I like that.
for sharing a bit about your self care practice. Slow mornings, start the day slow.
It's what's working for me now.
I get
So
it, Jackie. I want to switch to your leadership style, because you are the
well,
president of the American Optometry Association. And how long have
yeah.
you been in that role?
The actual presidency is a 1-year term.
Okay.
I've been on the board of trustees for 10 years. There are 11 of us on the
Oh,
board. We're all
okay.
optometrists from around the
Okay.
country. And so my presidency will end in 35 days and some
Ah,
hours. uh, and then I'll serve as immediate past president for a year, and that'll conclude my term.
in that role, and in your community service more broadly, perhaps, what is your style of leadership?
There are several things I've tried that didn't fit. And, you see other leaders and you emulate them. Much
Yeah.
of any success I've had in any area of life, I attribute to observing the people that are doing it well and doing that. I'm
Yeah,
not a big researcher. If I'm going to buy a new piece of equipment, I don't want to, research it and figure it out. I want to call Brad Lane and see what he bought, and I'm going to buy
for
that.
sure.
So,
Yeah, for sure.
um, but that's not necessarily the best way to develop a leadership style. Most of your listeners are probably familiar with all the personality tests out there. And the one
Mhm.
that we've used frequently on the AOA board is the DISC profile.
Yeah,
And this is a room full of highly accomplished, not only clinical optometrists, but in leadership in their communities. None of us are very young because the level of leadership and commitment required for this board it doesn't work well if you're trying to raise your young family or develop your young practice. So first of all, you're in a room of high level thinkers. The D's, the dominant personality or the lion, those are kind of the people that you would obviously assume are in the room. And there are several of those. The I, the very influential, the ones who are great in a room, great in a crowd, great at a party. Those are people who have really achieved a lot of success in leadership. I am down in the middle of S and C. And it took me about 3 times of taking that profile test to accept that. I tried to be a D. I try to be
Mm,
an I, and I can
mm.
step out of my box, the whole introvert extrovert thing. My leadership style is definitely one of consensus building.
Okay.
I'm very interested I think I'm very good at reading a room. I'm very interested in how other people are feeling, sometimes
Mm.
cripplingly so. I have to be
Ah,
careful that doesn't stall me out, worrying
sure.
about how everyone's doing. But I'm definitely an information gatherer. I'm willing to hear another side. I have to recognize when I'm being influenced by an influencer or
Sure.
dominated by a dominator.
Hmm.
And it's a constant thought process going in my head to say, okay, for me, I need to gather all this information, process it a little bit, and then bring this group to a decision. So
Cool. Yeah, that's very helpful. Very helpful. The
I
good old
hope that it illustrates,
the good old
what
disc.
my thinking is.
Yeah, and I like how you touched on the awareness part. I need to be aware that I'm being influenced or that a dominant person is trying to direct things,
Mhm.
maybe not in the direction that's best for the whole. Tell us just what you love about what you do and maybe how that has changed over the years.
Optometry is a unique healthcare profession in that, we evolved from horology, which is the study of time and timekeeping,
Oh my gosh.
because watchmakers were the first to grind a lens to make it clear and to
Mm,
magnify, the surface of the watch. So
mm.
optics, the art of making lenses, was born out of jewelry, basically. So we did
Wow.
not evolve as a healthcare profession.
That's
We evolved
fascinating.
as, yeah, just a trade. It was as a, we're the ones who determine the refraction, grind the lens accordingly, and put it in a pair of glasses. It's very mechanical. But in the 70s and 80s, we recognize that an eye exam is something that many people will do when they won't go to other kinds of doctors. And so often we are the only touch point for healthcare.
Yeah.
And as our abilities improved and technology improved so that we can see deeper and more detail in the eye, first
Mm,
through magnification, then through photography, and ultimately now through all kinds of imaging technology, augmenting those images using AI, it's just really fascinating how much information you can learn about the health of a person by
yeah.
looking at the eye. The window to the soul is the eye, but in some ways, the window to the body is truly the eye. It's the only place we can look at blood vessels and at nerve tissue without peeling your skin back or sticking a scope inside you.
I hadn't thought
So, for
about that.
example, diabetes is a blood disease. We look at the blood vessels directly all day,
Uh,
every day. And endocrinology depends on us to report back and say, here's what's going in the eye. That probably is happening in the brain and kidneys too. So, all that to say, what I have appreciated as I've seen it evolve over 3+ decades is that eye care is truly part of healthcare management,
mm,
preventative care. And we as a profession have not done as good a job as the dentists, for example, at recommending regular eye exams with a doctor in person. We're thwarted by online temptations. Skip the eye doctor. You can get your prescription online. That's something that the AOA works hard to protect the public
mm,
from,
yeah, I
is the
bet.
misconception that just because I see fine, or I think I see fine, or I can get along fine with some cheaters I got at the drugstore, that doesn't mean your eyes are healthy.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in neurology. I do a lot
Mm,
of reading about how the eyes and the brain work. I kind of alluded to that earlier. And there is so much about things we perceive all day, every day, that is impacted by your vision and, by this organ that is technically a part of the brain. The retina tissue is very similar to brain tissue. And as we're looking at cognitive decline and neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Lewy body disease,
mhm.
um, along with glaucoma and macular degeneration, all of those systems are part of the same metabolism and process that we can observe in the retina. So I'm very excited about those next steps for our profession as um, becoming even further enmeshed in the overall healthcare team. I'm probably not going to be the one that says, "Hey, Skip, you've got Alzheimer's disease." But I really hope that in the near future, I'm the one to say, "Hey, based on what I'm seeing in your retina, I think a baseline exam with a neurologist is a good idea." And
Yeah.
if we can help get access to care and
Uh-huh.
discovery much earlier than it is now in so many systemic diseases, I think that's just a win-win.
Dr. Jacquie Bowen, what's the main thing you've learned in your lifetime so far?
Skip, the main thing I've learned in my lifetime so far is to do what you're doing while you're doing it.
Uh, do what you're doing while you're doing it. I love that. My mind is going in about 10 different places. I'd
Mhm.
love it if you would just kind of lead us through and unpack that. I know there are layers of meaning and nuance.
It could be phrased much more eloquently and intelligently. I realize those are very basic words. But as we've talked about earlier, there have been times in my life where all I can eke out is a very basic mantra.
Yeah.
When you and I first started talking, I didn't have to think about my main thing. I appreciated your prompts and
Hmm.
suggestions, but this is something I have come back to. As a Christian, I've really appreciated the main things that some of your previous guests have said. And as a woman, I've appreciated it. As a profession, I've appreciated them. And for me, this one main thing has truly been with me for a long, long time. It is more than just focus. So, some might say, well, that's just a way of saying focus on what you're
Uh,
doing.
we might
Because
expect that
sometimes,
from an
yeah,
optometrist. Focus, dial it
right.
in.
A little too punny, I think, if I go that direction. But what you're doing at the time may not require focus. I think when I think of focus, and I'm, okay, in optics, you're trying to fine tune things and sharpen it up as much as you can, and you're
Hmm.
doing work to really zero in on that. But sometimes the things that I need to do right now require me to defocus and blur the scene a little
Mm.
bit for healing and recovery, or just to pay better attention to what I'm engaging in. I spoke about being in a phase of coping. If
Yeah.
I was at work and I was thinking about my daughter at home with a hospice worker or whatever, I was not an effective optometrist. I was not listening to my patient. I was thinking about, when do I get out of here? Have they given her medications? And likewise, when I was at home with her, it was too overwhelming to think of what might be happening to my struggling business while I'm sitting here at home.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
learned that I don't have the capacity to do anything more than what I'm doing right now effectively. And if I do, that's going to send me over the edge. So throughout life, I'm very distractible. I probably have some undiagnosed attention disorder ish, going on. But multitasking is so encouraged. We brag about our ability to multitask. And
Yeah.
we kind of proudly say, I can't just do one thing at a time. I have to do several things and accomplish. If I'm sitting at a restaurant by myself and you look around, very few people sit at a restaurant by themselves without their phone. The phone is a distraction. Other thoughts are a distraction. And I have recognized, especially as I'm aging, that I am not as good. I can't drive and do as many things as I was able to do and feel safe as a driver. So all the way from deep thought to driving to work,
Hmm.
I have to frequently tell myself, tune into what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Do what you're doing while you're doing it.
I have a pretty recent example. Last weekend, I have a 1.5-year-old granddaughter, and
Oh.
she became a big sister a week
What's her
ago
name?
today. Phoebe is my granddaughter,
Hmm.
who is a year and a half old.
Okay.
Daphne is the one who's 1 week old.
Oh,
So
adorable names, by the way.
aren't they
Adorable.
cute?
Yeah.
Adorable little
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah.
Um, so my duty when Mama went into labor, I was in charge of Phoebe, my husband and I, but he had to go out of town, out of state for a family funeral. So we were pretty spread out in different directions. So he was gone. I had Phoebe. We went to the hospital and visited the baby. Had a lovely day playing, and she
Mhm.
stayed with me that night at my house. Woke up throwing up in the middle of the night. She, and toddlers don't think to run to the bathroom. They just throw up wherever on whatever. And so the pediatrician would not allow her to go home when they took the baby home. So I had Phoebe for 3 days straight. Fever was at 103.5 a lot of the times. She was tired. She was very snuggly. Anyone who has had children that kind of knows secretly we like it when they're sick because they're so calm and affectionate. But anyway, I had 3 days quarantined, just the two of us in our house.
Mm.
And she fell asleep a lot and she just needed comforting. And so we'd be sitting there and she would just be on my shoulder and she'd fall asleep.
Yeah.
And I wanted her to stay asleep. And guess what you can do while you have a sleeping toddler in your arms? Nothing.
Not
I'm
much.
sitting there thinking,
Yeah.
wow, my phone's over there. The TV remote control is over there. And I just had to do what I was doing right then.
Mm.
My job
Mm.
was to sit there in that chair for over an hour and
Yeah.
hold her and hum and sing to her and shift her and rock her and then, try to give her an ice chip. And it was so rudimentary. Just I was caring for a toddler for 3 days. Um,
Yeah.
and that was an example of the most important thing for me to do right now is sit here with no technology, no music playing, just with Phoebe.
Yeah. Great. Great.
And it wasn't easy. I'd love to be able to say, I'm very good at this. It's a constant work, constant reminder.
For sure. There's no doubt about it. Do what you're doing while you're doing it is your main thing.
Mhm.
Jackie, if a listener out there hasn't spent any time on that, if that hasn't landed with them yet, let's just brainstorm back and forth what might be some of the pain points that they're encountering. I'll start and kick it back to you, but a feeling of being spread thin.
I think we sabotage ourselves by making it worse with distractions.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're spread too thin, there's the important things, the obvious, my job, I got to take care of my kids,
Yeah.
my mom is sick, I've got all these things I have to do, all these hats I have to wear. But the obvious technology is spreading us more thin. So what we think might be, and this is kind of getting into a lot of things, a lot of thought process,
That's okay. Yeah, that's quite all right.
and I'm kind of experimenting as I'm answering this question, but the phone has become such a huge distractor in our life. And that little dopamine hit that we get when somebody likes something we've posted, or even the dopamine hit we get when our push notifications tell us we have an email or, a text
Yeah.
message, that sort of
It's
thing.
like, oh boy, it's silly. It really is. But
It's
it's real.
addictive.
It's
It's
real. Yeah.
truly neurologically addictive. And it also has opened up so much more opportunity. We never used to think about the things that we think about now. We didn't think about what was going on in other countries or even other states. We didn't used to worry about our high school friends' daily experiences at this age. And so it has really cluttered up your brain. I have always used, and I have trouble falling asleep because of my rapidly moving brain.
Mhm.
But the imagery I fall back on is the old school when your TV screen went to that snow pattern,
Yeah.
when you had the rabbit ears antenna and you couldn't get a picture and there was snow all over your TV screen. It
Yeah.
was just what we call white noise now. But I
Mhm.
imagine that I visualize that in my head, and any distraction is a little character marching in from the edge of the screen. And I have to visually push that character out of the screen. So many bombardments from the edges is a lot of visualization and keeping that away. And that's what I was doing when I was taking care of Phoebe last week.
Yeah.
As I was thinking, can I stand up and go get my phone? Nope. Sit down.
No, this thing
And
that's right over here. I just had this wonderful fantasy image of at night at 1:30 a.m. is when the networks used to sign off. They'd play the national anthem and it would go to white snow until the next morning at whatever time they signed back on. But
yep.
I just had this you just inspired this cool vision of my phone at about midnight going to snow and not being available again. It would be that
Mhm.
white noise and that pixel pattern of gray and white snow until the next
Yeah, as
morning, and
much
that
as
would be
practical.
that
I
would
mean,
be good for most of
it
us.
would. I mean, if you're a caretaker or, you're needing to listen to your child cry out in the night, that kind of thing, obviously. But
Of course.
if you're at all in a position to really put that white snow in your brain and
Mhm.
then let the characters come in that you need to work with gradually after you've cleared that screen, then introduce the thing that you need to do while you're doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Jackie, before we move on, I just want to ask. Always try to think about an application step. If a listener says, you know what Jackie said is really lighting up for me, I just realized that this is something that I need to be more mindful of. I need to do what I'm doing while I'm doing it. What might be an action step they could take today or tomorrow to start down that path?
A small increment of time to focus on something. If you are a prayer, if you are a meditator, if
Mhm.
you are planning a trip, if you are, if you have a job to do, making yourself focus on it for 5 seconds, because Truly, that in that short amount of time, my brain will go in another direction. As we're sitting here talking, you've probably had a million different thoughts about your day or tomorrow or what's going on elsewhere in the house. And rather than chastising yourself for losing focus or say, I'm going to sit and focus on this for 30 seconds. And if that's too long and you've lost it, don't beat yourself up. It gives you another opportunity to refresh. And as you keep mulling over that sharp edge, it's going to smooth out and become easier for you to negotiate your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to keep repeating it. And it's not a failure when you lose focus. It's not a failure when you get distracted. It's another opportunity to learn.
That's good wisdom. That's good wisdom. I'm reminded of a practice, hadn't thought about this, and thank you for rekindling this idea, but occasionally when I have a big project to get through and I'm struggling to focus, what I'll do is I'll set a 20-minute timer, and I may even put some background ambient music in. And at the end of 20 minutes, I stop wherever I am. I don't extend it by 5 more minutes. I force myself to stop, walk away for 10, take a break and do something fun, and then come back for another 20-minute effort. And that 20 on, 10 off is often attributed to a Japanese doctor, Izumi Tabata, and it can be used in physical training, can be used in thought work, but it's similar to what you said. I like yours a lot better. Like, can we do a 5-second increment and just not be distracted for 5 seconds? And I would assume that, Jackie, if we get good at that, we could stretch that out to 10 seconds, and we could maybe then expand it further. So that's a great application step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say this, and the optometrist in me cannot help myself, but you just sort of described what we call the 20-20-20 rule.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very physical. It's very eye health related. But when we have, so many people, students, people who work at home, and their job is to stare at a computer screen all day long. When you're doing that, you're engaging the muscles of your eyes. And so we encourage that every 20 minutes, you look 20 feet away or more for 20 seconds or more. And while you're at it, blink your eyes real hard, roll your shoulders and neck. But that 20-minute increment must be something about that, because it goes by fast and you have to set your timer and you're like, I'm busy, I can't do that. But just for visual resetting, we talk about that a lot.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. 20-20-20. I'm going to try that. Yeah, I'm going to give that a try. Thank you.
You do it.
So, Jackie, you're coming down the home stretch on your presidency of AOA. You're in the final chapter, as we've talked about offline. You and I are both in the final chapters of our current career. How are you planning for that transition? What is that looking and feeling like in your heart and in your mind?
I'm having a million conversations with myself and with other people about it. I'll tell you, first of all, my family has loosely engaged in a New Year's tradition of picking a word for the year. And my word for this year was release.
Oh my gosh.
Really value my identity, not only as an optometrist, but as a leader in the community, certainly as a leader in the AOA. It's important for me to come off this way or that way, but releasing some of those identities and recognizing that was a great accomplishment, an important phase of my life, but the next phase is going to include some different identities. I don't have to ditch those or lose them, but they're going to step backstage a little bit more. And what is going to emerge as on stage? So frequently I get asked, when are you going to retire? Or, who do I need to see next? Now, I don't engage all of those people in these conversations, but it's interesting to me, when I do have time to talk about it, what different things come out of my mouth, because it's different from day to day. Some days it's like, I don't want to talk about macular degeneration and dry eye one more time ever in my life after the end of this year. And other times it's like, I am scared of being bored. I am confident in my expertise as an eye doctor. If I don't get to do that, I'm going to go crazy, so right now there's just a whole lot of swings. I like art. I'm a vocalist, I'm a singer, and my husband is too. And so there's been that opportunity to sing over the years. But I kind of like to explore some other things. As far as what will you do next, I will probably continue to do optometry. I'll keep a license, but after June is sort of when I'm going to, physically start taking things out of my office That doesn't mean
Mm.
I'm leaving that practice, but I'm going to take the smaller cubicle that one of our associate doctors have, and I'm going to move one of them into my larger office.
Okay.
Just physical steps like that.
Yeah.
These two little granddaughters, that's opportunity.
Mm.
Usually in the first part of your life, you have time, and in the second part, you don't have any time, but you might have some more money. And so I'm looking forward to a time when I have time and money to do some things, travel, that I didn't have to do.
Mm.
So, it's not without fear too, because I'm turning 60 this year. Um, I've sold my practice to my eye doctor. My contract is ending at the end of this year, and we may renew that in some form or another. I'm ending on the AOA board, so a lot of completions. My son, who lives in
Yeah.
Alabama, is completing his master's degree, which in my mind frees him up to move closer to Colorado again. um, so it's just a big year of um, of finality. And I know I'm all over the map in answering your question, but
No,
that is sort of the answer to
rele
your question. I'm kind of all over the map.
you're releasing.
Yeah,
I
I'm
love your
releasing.
focus word. We do that. My wife and I do that. And ironically, release was my focus word, I think, in 2023. So that's, if you can tell, that really was medicine for me. So thank you.
Good. I'm
Thank you for
glad.
sharing that. And I think it's okay to be all over the map. You feel all the feelings, explore all the ideas. It's a wonderful, wonderful mindset to take. What would be your parting thought for our audience?
When we first started talking, I mentioned this imposter syndrome, which I think a lot of professionals, a lot of leaders, especially a lot of women leaders, um, struggle with on a regular basis. I would have dreamed if you had asked me at age 25 what life would look like now, or what I hope it will look like. I would have listed most of the things that I've got going on right now, but I could not be at this place had I not said yes when asked to step out of my comfort zone.
Mm.
AOA presidency it's a big deal in our profession. I am the 105th AOA president, but I'm the
Wow.
fourth female. But there have been 4 Coloradans who've been AOA presidents, so it's
Mm.
not something that a lot of people get to do. I'm deeply appreciative of the
Mm.
opportunity to do this, but it came by when someone says to you, will you serve on this committee, or will you call this legislator? Will you write a check to this campaign contribution? Nah, you never want to do that. You're never going to have the time and the money to serve in that way. Do it anyway. Just say
Yeah.
yes. Honestly, the networking opportunities and the experiences that you're going to get to have are so far beyond anything you have sacrificed to say
Mm.
yes to that.
Yeah. Couldn't agree
That's it.
more. That's a great place to leave it, Jackie. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom, your beautiful stories. It's just been a real pleasure. So long for now.
So long for now, Skip.
There was something about this conversation that stayed with me, and the more I thought about it afterward, the more I realized it wasn't any one particular story or insight she shared. It was how she showed up. Here in Jackie is someone who has had a successful career. She's a business owner, highly educated. She's at the highest level of leadership and has earned the respect of her colleagues across the country. And yet, if you listen closely, there wasn't an ounce of self-importance in Jacquie Bowen. Instead, there was genuine humility, honesty, and generosity of spirit. There was a willingness to openly acknowledge her limitations, her fears, her doubts, her uncertainty, her challenges. And I just love that. Interestingly, those things didn't diminish her credibility at all. They strengthened it. The people we trust most, you see, are rarely the ones who pretend to have all the answers, the ones who pretend to have everything figured out in their life together. No, the ones we trust the most are the ones who are secure enough to open up and tell the truth about themselves. We live in a culture that often confuses expertise with authority. The more someone knows, the more we expect them to speak from a pedestal. I'm up here, you're down here. But Jackie reminded us of a different model. Real expertise doesn't create distance, it creates understanding, and it reduces that distance. That's why her main thing resonated so very deeply with me. It wasn't because it was complicated, but instead because it was beautifully simple. Do what you're doing while you're doing it. It's about being fully present with the person across from you, fully present with the work right in front of you, and fully present with the life you're actually living today instead of the one you're worrying about next. Maybe that's why Jacquie, with her humility, honesty, and generosity, felt so refreshing. She didn't just talk about attention, she embodied it. The older I get, the more I become convinced that attention is one of the purest forms of respect we can offer another human being. That's what I found in my new friend, Dr. Jacquie Bowen. And that's what will stay with me. That goes by incredibly fast, doesn't it? Time flies when you're hacking wisdom. Thank you for listening to this wisdom conversation. Let's give a big hearty thank you to the crew of the Main Thing podcast. These are the folks who truly keep the wisdom pipeline flowing. Audio engineer Bob Hotchkiss, strategy advisor Andy Malinowski, public relations and partnerships guru Rachel Bell, social media and digital marketing expert Chloe Linneberg, graphic designer Emma Malinowski, and of course our patrons, those generous folks who provide monthly funding support to help underwrite our costs of production. I couldn't do it without you, nor would I want to. Your feedback matters a lot. If you have a question, a suggestion, maybe an idea, or even a nomination of a future show guest, I'd love to hear from you. Email me at info@themainthingpodcast.com. Well, that's a wrap for this show. I'm your host, Skip Linneberg, signing off for now and inviting you to join us again next time for another special delivery of wisdom.